If you blindly encourage a short kid by saying, "Yeah kid, keep spending your time on basketball. You will make it to the NBA someday." In my opinion, this is what will have the real negative impact on the kid.
No, what? This is like telling a high school basketball player that they won't be able to score a three-pointer on the court because you've only seen NBA players do so. So last year, Geek came out with a couple of videos addressing why he hadn't unlocked the front lever yet, in which he goes through a series of points to prove this single argument, which roughly states that front lever is almost impossible for him due to his proportionally short arms. These videos basically came under fire with a lot of people telling him that he wasn't training hard enough, while Geek on the other hand presented some math equations and formulated measurements to prove his argument, and in turn we've seen a lot of discrepancies between those who think Geek can achieve front lever and those who now support him because of his argument. I'll apologize that I hadn't addressed this issue earlier because I've kind of been busy recently, plus I've only just gotten this camera. But the requests for this video haven't really stopped, and so I'm going to go through a thorough review of Geek's claims. I'm going to go over his math, I'll analyze the physics principles, and we'll see if Geek is really being legit here. So on to the issue. Geek has been training front lever for I think more than a year, but he still cannot hold it, so he goes and gets a DEXA scan and he gets all these numbers back and plugs them into this physics equation that he calculated. And the reason he does this is because he wants to find the angle between his arms and body if he were to hold the front lever position. Geek correctly states that your center of gravity will always be directly below the bar, and he notes that the longer your arms, the larger the angle will be. The shorter your arms, the smaller the angle will be. And that's where his main point comes into play. He correctly diagnoses a smaller angle as more difficult, and therefore the shorter your arms are, the harder front lever will be for you, which is correct, but not for the reason he states, which I'll explain later. There's also some credit to muscle mass, where the larger your back is, the higher your center of gravity will be placed, thus aiding in the front lever. But here's Geek's explanation. After plugging in his numbers, he calculates that his arms will create a 47-degree angle with his body, and he compares this to some other YouTuber athletes that he managed to measure, most of which were a little higher than 50 degrees, and obviously he credits this to his body composition and to the length of his arms, which happen to be shorter than average. Geek's conclusion thus is that if your body composition forces you to have an arm angle of less than 50 degrees, front lever will be nearly impossible. Over 52 degrees, on the other hand, would be the typical front lever holder. And it all makes some sense. You can't just train hard because science and math are here to prove that the front lever is not accomplishable for everyone. But we saw a lot of numbers. We didn't see science or math.
I talked to multiple people and reached out to multiple coaches, and the advice I got are all pretty much equivalent to train hard, be strong, and don't be not strong. As a person who is strong enough to do the one-arm pull-up, I am tired of hearing people telling me that what stops me from achieving the front lever is because I'm not strong enough.
So I'll have to begin by giving Geek some credit here. He starts the video off with and also reiterates the idea that you cannot just blindly train hard to achieve your goals. You need to seek strategy and you need to know what you're doing.
The basic idea is that your center of mass has to be right below the bar. Therefore, if you have long arms, the angle between your torso and your arms can be bigger, which will make the front lever easier for you. But if you have short arms like me, the angle between your torso and your arms needs to be smaller, which will make the front lever significantly more difficult. You can go find a lat pull down machine yourself and see how much weight you can pull with various angles in the front lever position.
Geek is partially right here. Smaller angle definitely has correlation with a harder front lever, but this is all Geek says. He doesn't explain anything further, rather he continues throughout his videos by saying that a smaller degree is what makes the front lever more difficult. That's not the case. Instead, it's a combination of leverage through the shoulder and directly relative contraction, in which leverage is dependent on arm length, contraction on the angle determined by distance. You'll see Geek demonstrate the difficulty with angles on a lat pull-down machine, but you can clearly see that there is no angular leverage whatsoever. He's mostly relying on the contraction of his muscles, which obviously will lead to a change in the difficulty, which he's crediting to the decrease in angle, not distance. That's two different subject matters.
Fortunately, we all can do a DEXA scan and use the data to calculate the required angle between our torso and arms. It's an approximation, but a pretty good one. The very basic idea is that the center of mass of your different body segments is the geometric decomposition of the centroid of your entire body. We will have the length of the head divided by 2 times the weight of the head, plus the length of the head and plus the length of the chest divided by 2 times the weight of the chest. It's the same idea for the abs, hips, and legs, so I'm not going to repeat them. As for the arms, it's the length of the head plus the centroid of the entire body minus the length of the head divided by 2 times the weight of the arms. The denominator is just your entire body weight. Now, if you shuffle the unknown variable, which is the centroid of the entire body, to the left side of the equation, you'll be able to solve the centroid by simply plugging in the numbers. Once you have the centroid, the angle is simply the arc cosine of centroid minus the length of head divided by the length of arms.
Now, the equation is where it gets hard. There's two things to take into consideration. First, it's the center of gravity of a complex object. And second, the front lever is an interdependent lever. That means that it's not actually a class 3 lever system, although it still has most of the components of a front lever. But instead, the angle of the front lever is all natural. It relies on itself, or the leverage arm. Geek does this correctly. He constructs a physics equation by taking the lengths and weights of parts of his body that were measured during his DEXA scan and sets the entire formula equal to the location of the center of mass. Because of the interdependency of the lever on the arm, which will measure from directly over the center of gravity to the shoulder or fulcrum at an angle, the arm measurements are a separate variable set to the center of gravity, which will then be solved for. To find the inner angle, you use arc cosine. Geek's equation is mostly correct, save for one extremely huge issue. You'll notice that to determine the center of gravity of his different body segments, he simply plugs in 1/2 instead of better fractional estimates, which is completely inaccurate. Granted, there is no accurate way to determine these measurements, but this alone completely destroys Geek's measurements. His theoretical angle in a full front lever is far from 47 or 48 degrees. It's most likely closer to 50 or higher. But he still manages to plug in decimal points to his angle measurements, which is completely misleading. As a result, Geek's math is not wrong, but his calculations are.
Bigger upper body mass will make achieving the front lever easier, but it will make rock climbing more difficult.
I don't really understand what he's saying here because most of the best rock climbers are very well built. They don't have tons of mass, of course, but having a considerably large amount of back muscle as a climber isn't uncommon.
As a result, the angle between their torso and arms doesn't need to be as small as mine. After analyzing all these thoroughly, I am inclining towards giving up on the front lever, because I won't get it no matter how hard I continue to train for it. No one can defy physics.
There's a single major flaw in Geek's argument that I think is the most important to address. It goes a little bit like this. The earth is flat and I will prove it to you. 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 plus 6 is 11, and thus 6 plus 2 plus 3 is 11. I just showed you some complex math and therefore I am right. Being able to solve math equations does not prove your argument in any way. Geek essentially attempts to prove that the angle of his front lever is less than 50 degrees through a rather simple physics equation. He then argues that because the 4 YouTubers he found online measured at a little higher than 50 degrees, it essentially meant that the front lever would be impossible for him to achieve. Having a front lever with a lesser angle is more difficult, yes, but there's absolutely no argument provided as to why having an angle less than 52 degrees is suddenly the nearly impossible range. Geek constructs a huge math equation where he plugs in a ton of numbers and comes to the conclusion that his angle will be at 47 degrees. A couple of people he found measured at 50 degrees, therefore he cannot front lever because he's not like them, I guess? But why? I feel as if this is just a great example of discouragement or frankly giving up. All I see is Geek looking for an excuse to justify his inability and creating a petty, fallacious argument, which would then influence others to quit, especially when they see that they're not like the rest. This is the part you guys have been waiting for. It's time to finally destroy Geek's argument and prove to you that he really isn't training hard enough. There's 4 points here, 2 categories, 2 points each. First, I'll explain the inaccuracy of his angular argument and show you guys why you can't just look at angles. Second, I'll explain why Geek or anybody with a functional body should be able to achieve the front lever. Now that section is the most important in the entire video. Feel free to just skip right to it and not pay attention to anything else I've said. Longer arms is easier than shorter arms, but only when it comes to the angular leverage in front lever. The longer your arms are, the more of a leverage advantage you have. But that's when you're not talking about forced directional leverage. Forced directional leverage is a static lock in place that technically isn't actually a leverage. But this occurs when you cue your force output exactly downwards in line with the force of gravity while cueing your power output to force your shoulders back, thus eliminating most of your force in the angular direction and instead relying on back pressure. In such a case, short arms is actually easier because they are closer to your body. The angle at which you force your shoulders to drop is much sharper and will act against the angular leverage much more efficiently. Extremely long arms means you're just pulling down. The downside to forced directional leverage is obviously the elimination of the lever system. The front lever raise and press are more difficult to perform, but this proves that short arms aren't always a disadvantage in a lever system, although they certainly aren't the most helpful. Scapular shearing. It's similar to shoulder positioning, but it's a more technical reference to a wider range of shoulder movements, not just the 4 standard elevation, depression, protraction, and retraction. Scapular shearing refers to intensifying moments through shoulder position by moving the location of the inner portion of the shoulder plate away from its origin, either by a lateral movement or by an outward or inward circular motion. What you get by doing this is the dead, where you kill leverage through shoulder intensification. You simply cannot argue against scapular shearing. Front lever is very possible with the arms being close to 0 degrees from the body. That's the dead front lever. Given it may typically use a false grip, the dead front uses the smallest degree possible in a front lever, yet it is still achievable, although not all that realistically for everyone. You can see here that the angle of the arms from the body can't be used as a determinant. The position of the shoulders is just all too important. Geek's argument can be proven wrong by just one single real-life example. See, he claims a causation between shorter arms, which leads to a smaller angle, which leads to the front lever becoming closer to impossible. But let me ask you in more technical terminology. What actually happens when you shorten the leverage arm? Or how do you even do it? Well, the length of the leverage arm is determined by the distance between the basing point and the fulcrum. To shorten the leverage arm, we bring those 2 points closer together, which forces the basing point to be moved. Okay, I'm kidding, that's not the end. But in all seriousness, the elbow front lever is what directly disproves Geek. Almost every single athlete I know who has unlocked the front lever will go on to unlock the elbow front lever, or a low Victorian of sorts, typically within a year to 2 years or so. It's not a difficult move. You see what Geek's argument looks like now? This is as if we placed Geek within a room of 100 people, including him, all with the exact same body composition and measurements. The only difference is that the other 99 people have shorter arms than him, to the extent that they can only do an elbow front lever. Or maybe, let's say they all have the exact same arm lengths. Either way, All of these people manage to unlock front lever with their theoretically extremely short arms, an occasion that happens very often with the implication of a shorter leverage arm. And to be honest, Geek's arms look normal. I don't see any remarkable shortness to them, even if that did matter. But if Geek can't unlock the front lever, what reason would you say that is? And the only reason I can possibly come up with is that he simply isn't training hard enough. Geek is here claiming that having an angle at under 52 degrees is nearly impossible, but that's because he's facing the corner without realizing that every other person who has attempted to has been able to. Yeah, you look kind of bored. Okay, this next one's interesting. It's called the theory of compensation, and it's basically the idea that somehow or some way our body will adapt to the front lever and maximize leverage efficiency. There's two main ideas to this, both of which make sense and are definitely true, but we can't really assign them to any linear progress in becoming stronger in the front lever. The first part of this theory is that as we progress towards front lever, we become stronger and will thus grow more muscle, which causes our center of mass to shift upwards, leading to the front lever becoming easier. It's like a win-win situation. The stronger you get, the more muscle you gain, the more leverage you get, and then the easier the front lever becomes. Don't expect a twig head to achieve front lever at the same body composition that they are at right now. The front lever will progressively become easier. So if you can't hold it yet, don't focus on your current form and arm position because it will quite certainly change. It's like trusting the process, except you can't see the end goal quite yet. Now, the second part of this theory is natural retraction progress. You see this with a lot of athletes. When they first unlock the front lever, their form is not the best, and their shoulders are usually not all that good either. You see a lot of elevation, protraction, or at least neutral positions, none of which are correct. But as athletes progress and become stronger, their shoulders are able to develop enough to retract further through stronger delts and scapular muscles. This in turn helps develop forced directional leverage and a much stronger leverage advantage in general. Front lever is harder with a protracted shoulder, but to achieve better retraction of the shoulder takes time and development.
The larger the angle is, the easier it is. The smaller the angle is, the harder it is. This is also why only a few individuals in the world can do a Victorian.
No, that is not the reason why only some people can do the Victorian cross. The reason why not that many people can hold the Victorian cross is because it is a very difficult element. But seriously, what he said here doesn't make any sense. The Victorian cross is not a leverage element. Instead, it uses a moment arm. It's the same as an iron cross. The shorter your arms are, the easier it is. Think about it this way. Is it easier to hold a 40-pound brick in your hands or a 40-pound broom from its end? Obviously, the brick, therefore, a shorter moment arm. But aren't short arms impossible for front lever? So I'd assume that it would be possible to achieve Victorian easily if you have short arms, but then never achieve the simple front lever by Geek's logic. Or is there some mysterious equilibrium of the perfect arm length that is long enough for front lever, but short enough for Victorian cross? Plus, for further explanation, the front lever elemental progression goes from front lever to elbow front lever or low Victorian, to an actual Victorian, and then to wide Victorian, or similar to Victorian cross. You could also substitute the low Victorian with a front lever touch of the same difficulty. The idea here is the elimination of leverage through peak contraction, then the addition of a moment arm through greater width, the difference between back lever and Maltese.
There is also another accusation that I need to address.
I really think that he is sending a pretty bad message to the impressionable young athletes that are watching his videos. And I really think that no matter what people say or whatever science even dictates, if you want to be able to achieve something, you should be able to work for it and prove everybody wrong.
Of course, we should encourage kids to be ambitious and aim for big, grand things, but at the same time, we should also let them understand basic science and facts to accurately assess where they are at. If you blindly encourage a short kid by saying, "Yeah kid, keep spending your time on basketball. You will make it to the NBA someday," in my opinion, This is what will have the real negative impact on the kid.
No, what? This is like telling a high school basketball player that they won't be able to score a three-pointer on the court because you've only seen NBA players do so. The kid obviously has less skill and ability to score a three-pointer, but this logic is just so wrong. From what I know, I think Barkage did end up responding back to Geek talking about shorter players in the NBA, but the encouragement based on a small percentage of people being able to achieve something is not what we're talking about here. What we're addressing here is the issue with Geek discouraging many athletes and beginners from training the front lever due to a false claim that it may be too difficult for them, when in reality it is a widespread skill that literally everybody is able to achieve.
Well, that's not true. As long as you have two arms that are long enough to reach your center of gravity, then you can front lever.
Bro, what? So I think Geek's message is actually quite destructive to the calisthenics community, and I really hope he comes out to apologize or something. I really don't hate him at all for this. He seems like a genuinely nice guy who works hard to entertain his audience, but it also does make for some good content. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and remember to subscribe for some more upcoming content.